he went into a sort of hypnotic state and basically woke up as he was digging graves and basically pulling freshly buried people out of their graves.
Murders, mysteries, unexplained stories, and our family's crazy opinions on them all. Join us now. The Family School of Thought is in session.
Hey everybody. Thanks again for joining us once again. Hope everybody had a fantastic week. We had a fantastic weekend because Cassie was here in Michigan with us.
I was.
We had a great time.
Yes. A good time.
Really miss you. And we were able to meet with all of us together with Matt and Odin, Grandpa, Ruth.
Yep.
We ate lunch at the airport, literally on the tarmac. That was
breakfast,
fun.
But yeah.
Breakfast. It was a lot of fun. Anyways, let's talk about the weather. Jess, how's the weather there?
A little creepy. It's a little creepy. It's the end of the storm at nighttime here in Michigan.
Well, it feels like tornado. Looks like tornado weather when I look outside. Real still, gloomy looking.
It's yellow.
Yeah. There was tornado warnings that went through today when the storms hit our area. So, yeah.
Cass, how about out in Portland?
It's beautiful. I mean, it's hot, but it's not as hot as it's been. It was probably about 80 degrees today, but blue skies and sunny.
Yeah, it was hot here today, hot and muggy, and now it's gloomy and looks like a tornado could start in any second.
Yeah. We did see a nice big rainbow, though, Odin and I. So that's promising.
And the ocean by Florida is 101 degrees.
Yep, global warming.
101 degrees.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sounds impossible, doesn't it?
Yep.
I mean, sea life is not going to live at 101 degrees.
Nope, it's going to be gone within a couple decades.
I keep hearing that.
Global warming. I don't know why people don't believe it.
Okay. Well, that's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else going on, you guys want to talk about before we get started? Besides, nothing compares to you.
Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing compares to you.
I did just read that as I was getting ready for the show.
I'm so upset.
Okay, well, for our listeners who don't understand that, it's Sinead O'Connor, the singer of Nothing Compares to You, died. Was it today or recently?
I think today.
Yeah. I think so today. It was announced today, at least.
Breaking news about 4 o'clock here. Okay, let's get going today. Jess, tell us some historical
I got some
facts.
History, unexplained mysteries. And we're going to stay on the music end of this. We're going from Sinead O'Connor. Now we're going to go to some facts about 2 other well-known artists, I guess. So the first one is regarding Wolfgang Mozart and his death. Didn't realize this was new to me. Didn't realize it was a mystery, his death. But he is an he was, I should say, is an Austrian pianist and a composer who worked his works transcended generations, which I think we all today know who he is, or at least don't know his music, his name at least. And his talent and his passion was certainly passed on and has passed the test of time. And his works is sometimes overshadowed by the mystery of the circumstances surrounding his death. That's news to me. I wouldn't have known that. Don't know anything about his death. So, but Mozart died on December 5th, 1791 in his home in Vienna, Austria. And those who are close to him reported intense body swelling just before he passed, accompanied by a fever and a widespread rash. In the days following his death, a German newspaper announced that Mozart had died after being poisoned. However, even today, historians cannot point definitively to that cause. And although they claim poisoning could very well be the culprit to his death, other ailments such as rheumatic fever and infections following medical procedures, or even strep throat, could have caused him to have those symptoms and cause death as well. The quick decline of his health is what made several people question whether there was some type of questionable involvement in his death. And in the time leading up to his final days, Mozart was working steadily and appeared to be in perfect health. Today, though, experts admit that the closest that they have come to true cause of death is a collection of educated guesses. So nobody really knows. But also back in 1700s, I'm sure they weren't keeping track of all that, and they didn't really know some of that stuff. So
he could have had any kind of infection.
What?
He could have had any kind of.
Yeah, he could have had any kind of infection.
Or an allergic reaction, sounds like to me.
Sure. Yeah, that's probably, people may have called it poisoning, but it was just allergic reaction, anaphylactic shock. So, I don't know. The next one that I have is about Beethoven. This one I've heard. So, this one I have heard, but it's about his immortal beloved. Beethoven was born in 1770, and he's arguably one of the history's most accomplished composers and musicians, not magicians. And he was a piano prodigy. In spite of continuous personal trauma and advancing deafness that marked his later days, Beethoven left behind a rich portfolio of music. I think we've all heard his music, at least again, heard his name. His first name is Ludwig. I didn't realize his first name was Ludwig. I don't know if I've ever known that, but Ludwig van Beethoven. I lost where I was. Okay. Notes. After his death, there were notes that were found to reveal that he had another legacy. He had a tragic love story that occurred during his life. And in 1812, Beethoven wrote a series of letters to an otherwise unnamed, in quote unquote, immortal beloved. And for that year on, so 1812 on, numerous writings were found addressed to the same unknown paramour. Though historians have never unveiled the identity of Beethoven's love, many believed that she would have been a married woman in high status, which would be why he kept it secret, or the relationship was kept secret, and it was ultimately unfulfilled. It was unfulfilled, but many musical scholars believe that this potentially illicit affair progressed Beethoven's disillusionment and frustrations, and that it may have influenced his music itself, particularly an acute creative crisis that lasted for years, followed by a more melancholy, sober tone in his music in the later years. To this day, the mystery of his beloved is still lost on history. So we still don't know who he was in love with.
That's interesting. Did I understand right that he had a letter delivered once a year?
It just said there was a series of letters that started in 1812. So it didn't say it was just that year on, from 1812 on, there was just a series of letters that were addressed to the same person, but we don't know who that person is.
That's really a cool concept.
And it's kind of
write a letter to your mother after my death. Once a year, she would get it.
Right. Yeah, I've heard of people doing that, especially like parents that die. When their kids are young, they do stuff like that. But this, it makes me wonder: is it creepy or is it cute? It goes on that creepy cute scale, because was he obsessed with somebody that was married or whatever, and she found it creepy, and so he kept writing these letters that never got delivered, because it doesn't say they were delivered. They were just letters that he was writing. And so was this relationship one-sided, and was he kind of stalking her and obsessed with her, and which makes it creepy? Or, I mean, if she was married, it's not really super cute anyway, because they're having, an affair, but, that's something too, where, is it cute? Did she have the same feelings? And I mean, back then, there were more arranged marriages and stuff. So was this a, Romeo Juliet type of love story where, the forbidden love kind of situation?
Right.
But there you go.
It probably would have been forbidden love, but
right. So there you go. Is it creepy or is it cute? We don't know, because we don't know who his love
if
was.
they made a movie of it, who would you put as the woman? Julia Roberts?
I don't know why you're so obsessed with Julia Roberts.
Because he knows I like her.
It sounds like a perfect part for her.
And one, Julia Roberts is too
Sandra
old to
Bullock.
be playing the love interest in a story like this.
Who's to say it's a girl? Like,
Right.
what
True.
better
Actually, I thought you were
relationship in
getting
those
to that.
times would be a same-sex relationship?
That's what I
Many
thought
scholars
you were
have
thinking.
come to believe that
But
probably.
I also feel like back in the 1700s, well, he was born in 1700s, so this was early 1800s. I think it was not as frowned upon. It was more accepted back then, but who knows?
I think that would have been just about the period where it was.
Well, there is the question on, I've seen it around too, where especially for guys, is he gay or is he European? That's a question. Because I think, especially like Europe, it's more acceptable,
Right.
and people are more fluid with sexuality. It's not questioned or frowned upon.
I'm sure it's a cultural thing in most parts.
Yeah.
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 Well, it's a religious thing, is what it is.
Right.
So where there's more religion going on, there's more forbidden.
Well, there's a lot of mystery revolving around Beethoven himself, because he's kind of one of those historical figures that they question his race a lot. They think that he may have been an African American man.
Really? I've never heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I knew he was
so there's
deaf.
a lot of and then obviously he went deaf later on in these years. But yeah, with his, I think there's just some of old paintings that kind of have more facial structure of that, African American, African facial structures. And same with, the secret lover, a lot of times, yes, maybe it was a bit more.
And maybe it was a racial. Yeah, racial love thing too, where something that was not as accepted.
Right.
Probably still isn't, but 300 years later, we're still fighting the same fights.
Right. Interesting.
Really? The more you know.
The more you know. There you go. So two classical pianists and composers.
Probably two of the most famous.
Yes, two of the most famous
composers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now my question, Cass, is your song?
No.
What? Does your song relate?
No.
Okay.
My song relates, but because it's my week to do a story, it ties in with the story that I'm doing. So it has nothing to do with composers, but it does have to deal with the story I'm doing this week.
Yay.
So it relates in that way.
Is that Helter Skelter?
It's not Helter Skelter. It is, so this week's song is Dead Skin Mask by a band called Slayer. They are a metal rock group. I don't think any of you really know them. They were very popular.
I've ever heard of them before.
They were very popular in the late 80s. Or 80s, kind of early 90s, I don't think. But, so yes, they're very much a hard metal band. But this song particularly was inspired by one of Wisconsin's most prolific serial killers, known as the Butcher of Plainfield. And he would later become an inspiration to a lot of things that I will get into in my story. But his house was found with multiple bodies, decapitated, disfigured, and furniture, as well as dishware made out of human skin and bones.
Wow.
Yeah. It's basically became the Wisconsin House of Horrors. And so I'll just go right into my story this week, because not only did this serial killer inspire this song, he inspired pretty much every big horror film you've really ever thought of. He was this inspiration for Norman Bates from Psycho. He was the inspiration for Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs, Otis Driftwood from Rob Zombie's The House of a Thousand Corpses, as well as The Devil's Rejects. And even as soon as recently of American Horror Story, their second season of Asylum, there was a character named Dr. Oliver Trudston that he inspired as well. And this is the serial killer Ed Gein. Has anyone heard of him?
No.
I have, but I don't know why. So
About to find out.
Well, like I said, like he is pretty much, I think they call him like the godfather of pop horror. Like he has, like the list I gave is basically just some of the inspirations. He has been the inspiration for a lot of horror characters, a lot of serial killers. There's some people who say that he would later inspire serial killers themselves. So there's a lot. He's pretty much the most notorious yet unknown serial killer in the world, kind of thing. Like he is the inspiration, but a lot of people don't know him exactly. Yeah. So Edward Gein, he was born August 27th, 1906 in La Crosse, Wisconsin. He was the younger of two boys. His mother, Augusta, was a devout Lutheran. She would often preach about the immortality and evils in the world, especially women. She claimed that women were just promiscuous instruments of the devil to tempt other people, mostly men, mostly her young children. And she also claimed that drinking was a devious sin. And this came from the fact that her husband, the two boys' father, George, was an alcoholic, and it did lead to him losing many jobs, as well as he had to sell the family grocery store and move the family to a small farm. I guess not a small farm, an isolated farm in Plainfield, Wisconsin, when the boys were young.
I'm sorry. You probably said this already, but what years are we talking?
So he was born in 1906, and there's no real time frame of when all this happened. It just says when Ed and his brother Henry were very young. So I would guess in 1910, somewhere around there, maybe 1920. Because this is another thing is that the timing kind of seems weird to me, but I mean that's me now as an adult. But they moved to this small isolated farm when the boys were young. It is said that Ed basically only left this farm when he had to go to school, and he also had trouble making friends at school. He was considered to be very weird and off-putting by a lot of his schoolmates, as well as his teachers. But even when he did finally make friends, it was said that Augusta, his mother, would scare them off. She would also punish Ed for making friends. So she very much isolated Ed in general. They formed a very creepy kind of coexisting attachment. And Ed's father died when he was about 34. It said in 1940. And he and his brother Henry began to basically take odd jobs around the town to help pay for the bills of the farm. Mostly they did like handyman work, lots of like little small jobs helping out around the town. It was said that Ed was known for being a very good babysitter, and he seemed to do really well with children in town. And so this was like when he was 34. So this is why I kind of find the time frame weird, is because they're 34 and like neither of them seem to have a life outside of this farm. It just seems odd to me, but I guess that's just me.
So, and they're babysitting?
And they're babysitting.
That seems weird.
Babysitting. Well, Ed, I don't know about Henry. Henry seems to be fairly well adjusted, but he's still living on the farm with his mother, so I don't know. But Ed and Henry actually began to fight a lot in the later couple of years, because Henry noticed that Ed and their mother Augusta had a very like attached relationship. Augusta did not like when Ed would go out into town. Ed sought his mother's approval for everything. They would basically sit in the house together all day long. And Henry began dating a young divorced mother. And so he started to basically get outside of the house a lot more. And because of this, he could see how bad things were getting between Ed and Augusta. And so he started to basically talk down about Augusta to Ed anytime he could. And it seemed to very much upset Ed. He did not like that Henry was calling out his mother's behavior. And so in 1944, supposedly accidentally, Ed had called local authorities about a uncontrollable vegetation fire that had gotten out of control, and it was basically consuming a lot of the property. But not only that, but his brother Henry had gone missing and he couldn't find him. So as basically a rescue attempt was made, people were sent out to search for Henry on the property. And of course, Henry was found dead on the property. He was found face down. But there seemed to be no signs of burns from the fire. The only thing was a couple bruises on his head, as well as his autopsy said that he died from asphyxiation. So the authorities basically just said that he must have died from shock, from seeing the fire. I think at the time, Henry would have been 43. So he died from shock, seeing a fire on the property. That happens all the time. So now it is just Ed and Augusta, his mother. Unfortunately, she has a stroke not long after Henry's death at 66. And this leads to Ed basically taking care of her. Like, he takes care of her full time at this point. But it only is for about a year before she has her second stroke in 1945. And this would eventually take her life. Ed basically was reported as being devastated from the death. He lost his only friend, his only loved one in his life. So he was basically alone. He no longer had any members of his family. He was living on this farm all by himself. And he became kind of the town loner. And he was the town loner for the next 12 years, somewhere around there. And he really was only seen when he was taking, again, some odd jobs. I didn't see anything about him babysitting again, but it did say that he worked on road crews that were helping fix roads, as well as he did a lot of handyman jobs where he would go to people's houses and help fix things on the property, stuff like that, as well as working on the farm himself. It was still clear, even 12 years later, that his mother inspired a lot of his actions and beliefs. Her strict spirituality seemed to still have a very tight hold of Ed's actions. He would talk about women very derogatorily, and he wouldn't really be around a lot of women most of the time. He was also seen by multiple magazines about the Nazi atrocities as well as cannibalism during these years. So he was just kind of very much considered a very strange and off-putting man, but nobody really knew anything much about him. Nobody had really been to the house since Henry and Augusta died. And he didn't really talk to many people in the town. But on November 16th, 1957, the Plainfield hardware store owner, Bernice Warden, would go missing, and it would be reported by her son. And it was said that the last receipt made in the hardware store was for a purchase made by Ed the morning she disappeared. And so police pretty much saw him as the lone suspect. They went to search his house, and this is where they would find Bernice in a small shed on the property. She was hanging from the ceiling by her ankles. Her torso had been cut and bled like a deer or pig, and she was shot with a .22 caliber rifle, as well as she was decapitated. So obviously, seeing this, they realized that they have to search his house. They have to do a huge search of his property. And what they find basically is why it's called the House of Horrors. It was basically, at the time, this was 1957, was unheard of, basically, what they found. It was almost, unthinkable, because they basically found entire furniture, like I said before when I was talking about the song, entire furniture made out of human bones and skin, waste baskets basically made out of human skin, human skulls basically carved in half and used as bowls and dishes for food, a corset that was made out of female torso, skin, and bones.
This man was a sick man.
There's a reason he was inspiration for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Well, and Psycho.
And Psycho, exactly. So that's, again, so he was the inspiration for Psycho because they found basically a human suit made out of women's skin that he would basically put on and pretend to be, like, walk around the house and pretend to be his mother.
Ugh.
So
And Psycho was made about, I think it was made probably about 1961 or 2 or something like that.
Well, so the book came out in 1959, so 2 years after this happened.
Okay, obviously inspired, yeah.
Yes, obviously inspired. Just like human faces, basically like skinned human faces were set up around the house. Just every inch of this house was covered in some kind of human remains.
Well, where did he get all these bodies?
So that's the thing. So so obviously they arrested him, and in 1957 he was so he went to trial. In 1957 he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and pled not guilty due to insanity. And really, he basically, the only crime that they could pin on him at that point was Bernice Warden, because they found her, basically dead body at his house. And he claims that pretty much everything else. So he confesses to one other murder, which is Mary Hogan, and she was a tavern owner in a town nearby. And she went missing in 1954. So these two women are the only people that he has admitted to killing himself. Everything else, every other body part, he claims that he went into a sort of hypnotic state and basically woke up as he was digging graves and basically pulling freshly buried people out of their graves, and just basically taking their bodies back home and dissecting them, tanning them, skinning them, all that stuff. So most of the bodies parts that are there were people that he just basically went to a graveyard and picked up.
Wow.
Yes. And so he's only, to this day, I think he's only charged with the 2 murders, not even his brother. So even his brother, it's now being kind of considered maybe he obviously he was involved, but he has not been charged with the murder. So 2 murders he is convicted of, and then I think 9 he's suspected of, but not that they don't have real proof that he was involved other than digging up the grave. And there's just so the list goes on and on of body parts that he had in his house. I think the most well-known one is the lampshade that was made out of human, I guess it's just human faces. So he had a lampshade made out of human faces, skin faces, as well as a belt made out of human nipples. Basically human nipples just sewn onto a belt.
Gross.
And unfortunately, there was a couple things that they believe, once they, I guess, judged. I don't know how they did this, but they basically judged that some of his youngest victims, whether they were stolen or murdered, were 15-year-old children. So obviously, he did not do well with children, as many of the other people would say. But yeah, so he in 1957 was basically deemed mentally incompetent and sent to Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, where he I think he was moved to a different hospital, but he was basically in mental hospital up until 1968, when he was deemed by a psychiatrist as capable of participating in a defense with a counsel. And this is basically where he explained, what had happened with Bernice. Apparently, he was at the hardware that morning and he was looking at a new gun, testing a new gun. I don't know. And apparently, he doesn't remember it well. He can't remember if he was in a daze or if the shotgun just went off by its, on accident. But he shot her and then basically got scared and was like, well, I got to take her home. Gotta get rid of the body. So, and he was pretty proficient at disposing of human remains and making them into his furniture. So he took him home. But again, he said that he can't remember if it was intentional or not. But he did confess to the murder, as well as, again, like I said, Mary Hogan, who he said that he, first of all, she was a woman, and then second of all, she was a tavern owner, which 2 biggest sins his mom talked about was being a woman and alcohol. So he didn't like her, and I guess they got into a argument, and he just decided to kill her. It doesn't say how he killed her, I don't think. I may have missed that. But her body and Bernice's fresh body were basically the 2 biggest or most used body parts in the house. Mary Hogan's face was in a plastic bag, or not plastic, paper bag near his room, as well as her skull was the only intact skull, and it was in a box near his bed.
And this stink.
But yeah, that's the thing, is that it probably did. But he was also, his dad was a taxidermist at one point, and so he was did a lot of taxidermy as well. And like I said, nobody really went to his house. And I think they said that like he pretty much lived in squalor, so it was basically like a hoarding house anyway. Like there was just lots of junk and trash everywhere, other than his mother's room. So basically, his whole house was just disgusting, the squalor, but he had basically walled off his mother's room, and so it was just like pristine, almost like the day she like the day she died, looked exactly the same. But yeah, it probably stank, probably. But again, nobody went in there but him.
Wow.
But so in 1968, he did go on trial again, basically when they deemed him fit enough to go on trial. He admitted to his crimes. He was found guilty, but he was still found basically mentally incapable. And so he was sent back to the mental hospital where he spent the rest of his life. He died in 1984 at the age of 77 due to respiratory failure brought on by lung cancer.
Wow.
So that
you were
is
say. First of all, I thought you were going to say after he got out of the mental institution, they let him go.
they said, "Oh, bye."
Yeah, right.
Then I thought you were going to say, well, he got 10 years.
They found him not guilty. He got out of there.
But he's already served that, so they let him go.
Yeah. No. He did fortunately serve his time. And he, I mean, it was only a mental hospital, it wasn't a jail, but at the same time, I'm sure, well, I know back in like the 60s, like the 50s to the 80s, I'm sure mental hospitals were absolutely torture. They probably were worse than prison.
Right.
Yeah, so I think maybe he got what was coming to him.
Right. Wow.
Then again, he probably just ruled the roost there.
Yeah.
Probably the most scary person they've ever met.
Wow.
Yeah.
In Wisconsin.
But yeah, I think it's so strange that he is probably one of the biggest inspirations for most horror genres, and yet nobody really knows he's a real person. Like I was talking to someone the other day, and they were like talking about how Buffalo Bill was inspired by trans people, and I'm like, no, he wasn't. Like, not trans people in general, just a crazy person who was obsessed with his mother.
Wow.
Wanted to be his mother.
Yeah, I just watched that movie Psycho, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and it's definitely for the time that was really a scary movie.
Yeah.
But how he made a mannequin of his mother and kept it there, and yeah.
Well, luckily, I don't believe his mother was one of his victims. I could be wrong, but I don't think he kept her in a chair with a wig on her head.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So that she turns around.
Yeah.
No. Let's hope
Not to spoil the ending of Psycho, but
Well, if you haven't seen Psycho yet, you're either way too young, or
That was a good movie.
it was.
I don't know if you ever watched the TV show, but it like started out pretty
Bates
well. I don't think it
Motel.
ended. Yeah, I don't think it ended well, but I think they did a good job.
I think that kind of
especially
ruined his
going
career
based off
because
of
that was the
Ed
only
Gein.
character he could play the rest of his life, Where that's Jamie Lee Curtis's mother.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about the movie.
She had a big career before that movie, so
Tippi
it didn't.
Hedren.
But
Or not Tippi Hedren. Is it Tippi Hedren?
Anthony, what's his name?
Am I thinking of birds?
You got me confused now. What are we talking about?
Anthony
Hopkins. Is that his name?
Nope.
The guy who played.
Silence of the Lamb?
Yeah.
No. The guy in Psycho.
Yeah. Hold on.
I don't know.
Let's see. Oh,
Perkins. Anthony Perkins.
Anthony Perkins. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. He could never really play another part after that because there was such a big,
She
huge
wasn't
movie.
really known for anything else after that. Like, she probably did some parts, but she wasn't, like, she's known for being the lady who dies in the first 5 minutes of Psycho.
Who?
The Jamie Lee Curtis's mom.
Well, she
Yeah,
was a
Janet
big
Leigh.
movie star.
Janet Leigh.
Janet Leigh. She was a big movie star. And she was at the time when she made that. I mean, she had a lot of movies before that. So, yeah, she was a big movie star. But,
There you go.
Anyways, that's a good story. I did
Yeah.
not know that.
Yeah.
You heard it.
Gives
I've been
me
wanting to do this one for a while, but I kept kind of putting it off and putting it off.
creepy.
But Wisconsin, just across the lake from you guys.
I'm telling
Yeah.
you, so many things happen within a day's driving for us.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can't even take the ferry over to Wisconsin from Michigan anymore because it's out of commission right now.
Oh, it is?
You can just drive, can't you? You can go up to the UP.
Yeah,
Right?
you can, but that's getting, from where we are up to the UP is like an 8-hour drive.
Well, I would go Chicago way,
Yeah,
Right.
right.
but
There's multiple ways you can get there. Okay.
Yeah.
so really, why is that ferry not operating? Because they're looking for that
I
gold,
think it's
right?
that ferry. Let me look in the news because I think it was like the ramp collapsed or something like that.
Cool. Yeah,
I
that's
think
not good.
I think they got it closed off. Just
Well, they have two different places. Was it up in Muskegon or Ludington? Or
Hold on.
didn't they have two different boat docks that you could take a ferry over?
It's the SS Badger.
Yeah, that would be.
and it goes from where to where?
That's a big one.
Just says, looking at
Ludington.
headlines, Michigan to Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think it's Ludington, Michigan, too.
Let me look. I'm getting into the story.
Green Bay or somewhere right there.
Yeah, SS Badger from Ludington to Manawack.
Just above Green Bay or something.
Yeah. But yeah, and it looks like it's suspended, the service is suspended indefinitely.
Really?
Really?
It's for mechanical failure of its ramp system. Because this is a ferry that you like drive your vehicle onto.
Right.
So yeah. I mean, I think, when they use the word indefinitely, it just means that like they don't know when it's going to be up and going again.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't think it's down forever. I just think it's going to be down for a while. They've refunded everybody that had already bought tickets and everything. So, yeah.
I've always wanted to take that ferry over.
Yeah, me too. We may not have a chance now. So
I know.
we won't be able to see, the sights of Wisconsin where a serial killer lived.
Well, that's the thing. So
Outfitted his house.
yes, well, his house is no longer there. I think in 1958, the town basically, because it was such big news, that the townspeople were really afraid that his house was going to basically become a museum or a tourist attraction. So it burned down accidentally, but they believe that the town people basically
Accidentally.
burned it down. Yeah.
Arson.
Back in the day when they didn't want negative attention.
Yeah.
Well, I think so. Gosh, what did it say? So because this was basically such a heinous crime that nobody had really this was not just serial killer. This was somebody who, inspired people like Jeffrey Dahmer and basically inspired a whole new generation of serial killers. It also, because it was just so dark, it was said to the news stories basically. What did they call it? They called it dark, not dark humor, but basically it created this story, dark storyline, humor and dark storylines, because they were just this is so crazy. Can you imagine living in a house just full of human body parts?
No.
So it creates not satire, but it said something. I'm trying to find it. Oh, it's like black humor or the
Dark
like
humor.
Geiners. Yeah, like dark humor. Like the Geiners are basically people who are fascinated by dark humor or dark subjects.
Yeah. Yikes.
No thanks.
Well, I mean, we did a lot of stuff about people who were legendary today, and created a lot of history. We got,
Mhm.
we got two pianist composers that are well known and inspired so many people, and you got a serial killer that also inspired a lot of people
Hmm.
for the entertainment of others or for themselves.
I don't think he did anything to be inspirational. Like, I don't think he went out of his like way to be inspirational. I think it was just absolute craziness.
Yeah.
And then when that happened, they couldn't have said, "Well, he just wanted the fame."
Right.
Right.
He wasn't just doing it for the notoriety. He
Right.
literally just wanted to skin and eat people. I think it also was the start of the idea of like serial killer trophies, just because literally his entire house was just filled with his victims.
Or, I mean, he was useful. He used all the parts of the human, right?
Right.
Exactly. He didn't let anything go to waste.
Right. There you go. There's with that dark humor.
That's your story for the week.
Good
There are
story.
creepy people out there.
Yeah.
And
creepy.
literally, this was like, I kind of kept it very short and simple. There was so much that happened with this case. Like I said, like he was, so I think they believe that his murders began in like 1948. So his crimes basically spanned the length of like just under 9 years. But because basically his mom died in 1946, 1945, and he became so secluded after that, it could have been any time between those years. And like I said, his brother died very suspiciously, so it could have started in
With his
1944
brother.
or earlier. But he did say that, so like I said, he said he went into like a hypnotic daze. He didn't know what he was doing when he was robbing these graves. And he did say that there was times where he would wake up and realize what he was doing and leave the grave or leave the cemetery.
It does kind of sound like he had some mental health issues that.
Yeah. Well, so he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, but I'm sure in today's day and age, he would have been diagnosed with DID or dissociative identity disorder.
Right.
Multiple personalities.
Well, how could he get into the cemetery and dig up all of these graves without?
This was.
I'm sorry. The gated communities.
Right. I mean, this was before, that was pretty big back then. People would go in and, people still go into cemeteries and steal the jewelry that's buried in
and stuff. Yeah.
And I think they said that he would basically dig up, like, it would be like freshly buried people. So it was like people who, like, the ground wasn't.
Obviously, if he wanted to, like.
Well, the next day when the ground was all messed up, it wasn't suspicious.
Yeah. Right. And I think they said that some of the graves, like, basically they figured out a couple of people he had robbed from, whether he told them or they, like, did some kind of research DNA. I don't know if that was available back then. But some of the graves they basically went back to, and the coffins were either gone or they were buried very shallowly, like only like 2 feet into the ground. So like it was clear that,
somebody dug
one
it up.
person, like, like somebody had dug it up and like barely tried to hide it, kind of thing. So they do suspect that a lot of the victims were grave robbed, but they can't tell like all of the body parts. It was just so many if it was that or not.
Yikes.
He must like the color cream. I guess I'm just. I was thinking like maybe not. Never mind. Scratch that.
Well, it's like, so most of them were like leather almost.
Yeah.
Because they were, treated to not decompose. So they were mostly brown.
I was going to say they'd make it brown. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I guess I was just thinking like all like one color, but
You could have made it patchwork quilt.
It was very patchwork quilty. There are pictures available.
nope, I
They're
don't want
gross.
to.
No.
Yeah, they're pretty gross. And they look exactly like you'd think. So I believe even some of the stuff is in museums. I can't promise that, but
Yeah.
So here's a
basically
question though, too.
dispose of most of it, thankfully.
I mean, it grosses us out that it's human skin that's like turned into leather and hide or whatever. But like, how is that different than animal skin?
Exactly. That's what a lot of people.
I mean, look where
that's
you
why
are,
it's
Dad.
basically inhumane.
You got a couple
Yeah.
things hung up on your walls up there. You know, a couple dead deer heads.
Oh.
Isn't that creepy?
How isn't that different? Yeah, exactly.
Just
That's
a different
true.
type of animal.
A living creature.
And
Right.
you got those deers that got their eyes wide open,
Yeah. They never
just
close
looking
their
at
eyes.
you.
That does not bother me a bit.
It bothers me when I sleep in there.
Does
Yeah,
it?
that is really weird.
Yeah, I try
Yeah.
not to think about it too much.
Really?
Yep,
I never even thought about it.
yep.
I slept in that room last time I was there.
Nope, I don't like it.
Skin from a creature that somebody killed and
Yeah.
put some stuffing in.
I was
But
saying that.
I bet you're not going to watch many of these movies or songs.
We'll see all
I know.
that. Like,
The fact that this really happened. This is a true story.
I don't
That's
like
why
scary movies.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the start, it says based on a true story.
You know what? I don't know that I've ever watched the Chainsaw Massacre.
Really?
I
Well,
have never-
Jeepers
It's brutal.
Creepers. Yeah. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I don't know.
Especially for the time. Like, it was brutal.
I'm sure I
The
did.
original.
I don't
Well,
remember.
there's two versions. One was from like the 70s, and one came out in late 90s, early 2000s. I want to say.
I did not
They
watch
kind
them
of
unless
tried
they
to
had-
keep remaking it. It's kind of
Yeah.
one of those films where, like, it keeps kind of coming back every couple
Right.
years. But the original in the 70s was pretty brutal for the time. I think it might have been like one of the first like rated R, almost NC-17 movies.
Yeah.
I'll have to find it and watch it.
Yeah, that one's pretty good. But then Jeepers Creepers, I feel like had a lot of this guy's stuff in there too. Because didn't Jeepers Creepers he made masks out of, like face masks?
So
I
he
can't
didn't
remember
know.
Jeepers Creepers too
That's
much because that one's based on a
Leatherface.
Michigan serial
So,
killer.
yeah, Jeepers Creepers is based off a Michigan urban legend.
Yeah, or yes,
and
yeah.
it might have some inspiration from Ed Gein because he would the monster. So it was like it wasn't like a human
Yes,
being
that's right.
in
Yeah.
that movie. It was a monster that would eat whatever body part he ate of yours. He would have. And
Yeah,
like basically,
right. Yeah, that's
if
right.
he ate your eyes, he would have your eyes. If he ate
Yeah.
your hand, he would have your.
Yeah, that's
You guys watch
right.
crazy movies.
Well, that one was I don't know. Jeepers Creepers came out again late 90s, early
90s,
2000s.
yeah.
I just remember like
It's
Justin
just
Long
for-
was in that one.
Yeah, it was like his first movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre would basically like I don't know if it was faces in general, but he's basically wore a mask of human.
That must be what I was thinking of then. The leather mask
Yeah.
is what I was thinking. So that's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I was getting those two confused.
And that's why I think it's been a while since I watched Silence of the Lamb. But Buffalo Bill, would kidnap girls, put them in a hole, and then skin them alive.
What's the lotion?
Put the lotion in the skin and it gets the hose again. So you wanted them nice and moisturized because, moisturized skin comes off the bone pretty well.
Think about that the next time you eat those ribs. And it just falls off the bone.
Yeah. Falls off the bone.
Oh.
All right, guys. Anything else we want to add to Cassie's story?
Yeah.
It's pretty creepy too.
Yeah.
I'm kind of excited to do this, though. This might be a new thing for us.
Yeah, I think this is a good idea. If you got any suggestions, if you guys want us to recap some mystery thriller movies or scary movies, give us the name of the movie or the documentary. Let us know that you're on board with it. And send us an email at thefamilyschoolofthought@gmail.com. It's scrolling across the bottom of the screen if you're watching us. Make sure to click that like button. Click that subscribe button. Let us be part of your commute to work. Maybe commute home. Bring us into your family.
All right. All right, guys. I think we're all set. Hope everybody has a great week. Hopefully we have good weather this week. There's nothing tragic happening out there. But we'll talk soon. All right?
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Ah.
Mom
Well,
did
I
that
was
story.
watching the news yesterday, and a plane crashed. Where was this? Probably was in California. I don't remember, but this plane crashed into a house, and the neighbors rushed in to help them, but the doors were locked, and the guy that was flying the plane
Answer the
went
door.
Open the door.
front door and left us.
Gonna say that's the plot of the movie Donnie Darko.
I was just thinking the same thing.